By the end of this video, you're about to hear something that will make you question everything you thought you knew about money. Power. And who actually runs the world in 2025. I'm dead serious when I say this. Stay until the very last minute because I'm going to show you one single document, publicly available right now, that proves the Rothschild family still owns or controls more wealth than Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, and the entire Saudi royal family combined. And if you think I'm exaggerating, screenshot what I'm about to show you. Because in the last 12 months alone, people have had their social media accounts frozen just for sharing this exact same information. You think the world is run by presidents, prime ministers, and tech billionaires you see on television every day? Cute. Those people are employees. Middle management at best. The real owners almost never give interviews, almost never appear in Forbes lists. And when their name does pop up, the mainstream media rushes in to call it a conspiracy theory within minutes. But here's the thing, conspiracy theories don't have public company filings, shareholder records, and centuries of documented history. The Rothschild family does. Let's start at the very beginning, because if you understand how this dynasty was built, you will never understand why they're more powerful today than they have ever been. The year is 1744. A man named Meyer Amschel Rothschild is born in the Jewish ghetto of Frankfurt, Germany. At the time, Jews were not allowed to own land, not allowed to join most professions, and lived behind walls every night. Meyer starts as a coin dealer, nothing special, but he's freakishly good at it. Within 20 years, he becomes the personal banker to the Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel, one of the richest men in Europe because that prince had a habit of renting out his army as mercenaries. When soldiers came home from war, they were paid in coins from all over the continent. Meyer Rothschild became the guy who could tell real gold from fake faster than anyone else alive. But here's where it gets insane. When the French Revolution breaks out and later the Napoleonic Wars, almost every royal family in Europe panics and starts hiding their gold. Guess who they trusted to hide it? Meyer Rothschild. By 1810, he has vaults full of gold belonging to half the monarchs of Europe. And then he does something no one had ever done before. He puts his 5 sons in 5 different capital cities, Frankfurt, London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples, and tells them, from now on we don't compete with each other. We work as one single bank across borders. For the first time in history, a private family creates an international wire system that is faster than any government postal service. They use coded letters, carrier pigeons, and private ships. When everyone else is waiting weeks for news, the Rothschilds know first. Fast forward to June 1815, the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon versus the British-led coalition. The future of Europe is at stake. Nathan Rothschild, the son based in London, has agents on the battlefield. The moment Napoleon is defeated, his courier races back to London, arrives 24 hours before the official British messenger. Nathan walks into the London Stock Exchange and does something that famous move you've probably heard about. He starts selling British government bonds like crazy. Everyone watching him thinks, oh my God, Britain lost, Napoleon won. Panic selling begins. The entire market crashes. And then, when prices are at rock bottom, Nathan's agents quietly buy everything back. When the real news arrives the next day that Britain actually won, the market explodes upward and Nathan makes the modern equivalent of $1 billion in a single day. That one trade turns the Rothschilds from rich bankers into the richest family the world had ever seen up to that point. People love to argue whether the Waterloo story is exaggerated, but here's what nobody argues about. After 1815, the Rothschilds became the official bankers to almost every government in Europe. They financed Britain's war effort, they financed the French Reconstruction, they financed the Prussian army, they even lent money to the Vatican. And every single time a country needed to borrow money, they had to give the Rothschilds special privileges in return, like the right to issue currency or the right to mine gold. Jump forward to the American Civil War. Who finances the North? Rothschild agents in New York. Who finances the South? Rothschild agents in London. Same family, both sides, double profits. World War I? Same story. The Balfour Declaration, where Britain promises to create Israel, is literally addressed to Lord Walter Rothschild. Not to the Prime Minister, not to the King, to a Rothschild. When Israel needs money in 1948 to buy weapons, David Ben-Gurion flies to New York and begs a Rothschild for a loan. He gets it, no questions asked. Okay, but that's all old history, right? They were powerful once, but today they're just another rich European family that owns some wineries and throws fancy parties. Wrong. Dead wrong. Let me show you what they actually control in 2025 right now, as I'm recording this video. First, the banking arm. Most people think the Rothschild Bank disappeared. It didn't. It just changed names to stay out of the spotlight. Rothschild & Co. is still one of the largest merger and acquisition advisors on the planet. In 2024 alone, they advised on deals worth over $1 trillion. $1 trillion. That's more than the GDP of most countries. Their clients? Governments, central banks, and the biggest corporations you've never heard of because they're privately owned. Second, the investment arm. Edmond the Rothschild Group in Switzerland manages close to $200 billion as of 2025. Their London-listed vehicle, RIT Capital Partners, founded by the late Jacob Rothschild, is sitting on another $5 billion. But here's the trick. RIT is famous for taking huge private stakes in companies before they go public. They were early investors in Rockefeller Center, in early Facebook partners. And right now, in 2025, they own massive positions in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and most importantly, central bank digital currency infrastructure companies. Third, mining and resources. The Rothschilds have controlled large parts of the world's copper, diamond, and gold markets for over a century. They still own big chunks of Rio Tinto, one of the largest mining companies on Earth. And until recently, they controlled the price of gold through the twice-daily London Gold Fix, a ritual they literally invented in 1919 and only gave up in 2004 when it became too obvious. But here's where it gets really dark for 2025. In the last 18 months, the Rothschild investment banks have quietly positioned themselves as the #1 advisor to governments rolling out central bank digital currencies. France, Switzerland, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and even the BRICS nations have all hired Rothschild & Co. or its subsidiaries to design their programmable money systems. Think about that's a coincidence? When the new digital euro pilot launches in 2026, guess whose private bank is printing the test notes under contract? A tiny Swiss printing company that is 100% owned by the Rothschild Family Trust. I have the shareholder registry right here if you pause and zoom in. And then there's BlackRock, the biggest asset manager in history with $11 trillion under management. You think Larry Fink runs that alone? Look at the 2025 shareholder list. One of the top 10 investors is a Swiss entity called Edmond de Rothschild Holding SA. Same family.
The deeper you go into the story of the deleted 2025 document, the more you realize one uncomfortable truth. This wasn't a simple leak. It wasn't an accident. And it wasn't a random file caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was a window on, unintentional glimpse into a future that powerful institutions were preparing, for long before the public even sensed anything was wrong. And now the question wasn't just what was inside the document, but why the people behind it worked so aggressively to erase every trace of it within 4 hours. Because once you understand the stakes, you understand their urgency. The file wasn't about a new policy. It wasn't about a single event. It was a blueprint, one that mapped out the financial fractures forming beneath the global economy. Cracks that most people couldn't see, but cracks that insiders had already begun expanding their entire strategy around. And when analysts inside 3 major agencies quietly admitted that versions of this plan had been circulating in early drafts for years, it became clear. The 2025 document wasn't leaked by mistake. Someone wanted the world to know. Or at least, someone wanted one specific person to know. The file began with a simple statement: the era of passive inflation management is ending. A phrase that sounds harmless to general audiences, but sent quiet shockwaves through economists who understood the coded language behind it. Inflation management is what governments use to prevent runaway prices. It's the backbone of modern stability. For a document to declare that the era was ending was analysis. It was a warning disguised as policy commentary. It meant that behind closed doors, major actors believed that inflation, deflation, and currency volatility would no longer behave predictably. It meant the system itself was changing, and at the center of that change was a shift so subtle, most people still don't realize it has already begun. Currency was no longer just money. It had become a weapon, a tool, a lever used to push nations into alliances or break them apart without ever firing a bullet. The deleted document outlined scenarios where financial warfare replaced traditional warfare entirely. Not hypothetical models, actual projections with dates, numbers, timelines, and participating countries. It named 3 pressure points in the global system, 3 nodes, where a small disruption could collapse entire markets within weeks. The first was sovereign debt exposure. According to the file, by late 2026, several major economies would reach to 2 GDP levels that historically signaled systemic danger. But the real threat wasn't the debt itself, it was how interconnected that debt had become. If one nation slipped, even temporarily, the ripple effect would be global. The document compared it to pulling a single thread from a woven net and watching the entire structure unravel. What used to be an isolated crisis could now ignite a chain reaction across continents. The second pressure point was digital liquidity dependency. Over the past decade, global markets have transitioned slowly from physical reserves to digital liquidity mechanisms, automated systems, algorithmic controls, and derivatives that operate faster than human oversight. According to the deleted file, these systems were nearing a threshold of instability. They weren't failing, but they were becoming too efficient, too reactive, too fast. A 5-second shock in a single market could now spread across the world before regulators even understood what triggered it. And if that shock was intentional, the effects would be catastrophic. The third pressure point was the rise of centralized digital currencies, not cryptocurrencies. Government-controlled digital currencies. The document claimed that by 2025 to 2027, these systems would begin replacing cash in ways the public would barely notice but feel deeply. Every transaction tracked, every payment monitored, every financial behavior analyzed and categorized. The document warned that while these currencies offered efficiency, they also opened the door to control mechanisms that could shape economic behavior at the population level. Once you understand these 3 points, you understand why the document's existence was dangerous. But the file didn't stop there. It described a scenario the analysts called the rebalancing window, a period between 2025 and 2030 when financial power structures would shift dramatically. Nations that controlled the emerging systems would gain influence. Those that hesitated would fall behind. And the most stunning part was the timeline. The document claimed the first shift had already happened silently in late 2024, when several major institutions completed liquidity transitions without publicly announcing them. In other words, the future described in the file wasn't coming. It had already begun. The document detailed the roles various countries were expected to play in the shift. Some were categorized as stabilizers, nations that would absorb economic shocks. Others were disruptors, positioned to challenge existing power structures. A few were labeled silent actor states whose innovations would quietly reshape the global system without taking public credit. But the most concerning section wasn't about any specific nation. It was about what analysts called the global sentiment threshold. They described it as the point where public trust in financial systems becomes irreversibly there, toward confidence or toward panic. In previous decades, this threshold took years to move. Social media, algorithmic news cycles, and instant communication now compress the cycle into weeks or even days. The deleted document warned that once public trust begins collapsing, institutions would have limited time to intervene. If they responded too slowly, the economic shift would accelerate beyond their control. If they responded too aggressively, they risked triggering the very panic they were trying to avoid. This part of the file explained something that had confused analysts for months. Why certain global institutions were making moves that seemed contradictory from the outside. Why central banks were tightening policy while simultaneously preparing stimulus packages. They weren't responding to events. They were preparing for the threshold. The deeper the document went, the clearer its intentions became. It wasn't describing a disaster. It was describing a transformation, one that the world wasn't ready to understand yet. And the reason it was deleted wasn't because the information was false, it was because the timing of the leak threatened to expose a plan that wasn't ready to be public. There was one line in the file that stood out. Stability is achieved not when the public understands the system, but when they believe it will protect them. A sentence that revealed more about the mindset behind the document than anything else. It wasn't about transparency. It was about perception. It was about controlling the narrative, shaping public expectations, and guiding behavior during a period of global financial restructuring. If people believed the system was collapsing, they would act accordingly. If they believed the system was strengthening, they would follow. And according to the deleted file, Belief, not numbers, would be the deciding factor in the next global financial era. But the part that disturbed analysts the most wasn't the projections or the warnings. It was the final paragraphs and outline of steps that major institutions were expected to take in real time as the rebalancing window unfolded. These steps weren't predictions. They were instructions. They included coordinated rate adjustments between multiple nations, synchronized liquidity injections during specific market windows, and controlled public messaging designed to guide perception. The document openly discussed the role of media platforms, influencers, and geopolitical alliances in shaping financial expectations. It was here that the intention became unmistakable. The 2025 document wasn't just analysis. It was strategy. A blueprint for managing a global transition without triggering chaos. And the most shocking part, many of the steps described in the document had already happened. Analysts reviewing the file noticed matches policy shifts from late 2024, coordinated adjustments that made no sense at the time, liquidity maneuvers that puzzled economists. All of them were listed in the document as steps in Phase 1 of the transition. Phase 2 was projected for early to mid-2025. Phase 3 was slated for 2026. The deleted document wasn't predicting the future. It was revealing the playbook. This raised a far more dangerous question. If someone leaked this file, what was their motive? Were they trying to warn the public? Was it a political move? Or was it a signal and inside message meant for someone who would understand the implications? T-file didn't say who wrote it. It didn't say which agency it came from. It didn't include the usual metadata that most classified documents contain. It was stripped, sanitized, intentionally clean. The only traceable detail was a timestamp that indicated the file had been generated only 6 hours before it leaked, meaning whoever leaked it had access to immediate internal drafts. When investigators began tracing the IP routes, they found something strange. To leak didn't originate from a government network. It came from a private research institution contracted for global risk modeling. That institution had connections to multiple central banks, 3 major investment firms, and a geopolitical advisory group with ties to several governments. In other words, the leak didn't come from a whistleblower inside a government. It came from someone inside the network that advises them. Someone who understood the implications deeply. Someone who knew that once the public discovered the global financial structures were quietly being redesigned, trust would become unstable. But someone who chose to leak it anyway. The final paragraphs of the document contained one last prediction. A moment in late 2027 when the financial system would pass through what analysts called the divergence point, a moment where the old system would no longer be recoverable and the new system would become permanent.